Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Advanced Course in Drones and Development. Today's masterclass is all about spatial GIS. So to talk about that, we will have Rohit Pansare, who is an environmentalist and a GIS expert. He'll be talking to us about QGIS, an open source application which is used to not just learn about GIS, but even apply it in large scale projects. So Rohit, welcome to the course and over to you. You may have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope I'm loud and clear. Let me just share my screen. Okay. I hope the presentation is visible.
Yes.
Okay. Right. So I'll be talking about geographical information systems. I think every one of us have used it somewhere or the other. Can some people give me examples of where they might have used? Don't worry, I come to the part where I introduce myself. But before I do that, I just wanted to know if you guys have any ideas of where you've most recently used or most commonly used GIS. Can you put
Sorry,
it down in the
we are
message?
not seeing the presentation anymore. We are seeing the Chrome.
Right. Fine now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any messages coming in? Let me see. Okay. Nobody used GIS recently? Come on. Have you used Google Maps? I'm sure you have. Google Maps is nothing but, oh, Amit is raising his hand. Okay, Amit, you can put it down in the message. Maybe I'll give you guys more time to talk after the session. But yeah, uh, so I've already answered the question. So basically, Google Maps. Okay, so Google Maps is a very good example of where you're using GIS every day of our life. Okay, all right. So today I'll be talking about these and other tools. Okay, so first thing, who am I? So Dr. Ruchi has already introduced me as an environmentalist and a GIS expert. Let me tell you, I'm neither. Okay, I'm a civil engineer, I'm an environmental planner, but I'm not a GIS analyst or a developer. Okay, you need to understand that GIS is a great tool and it can be used by anyone. Anyone who is a geographer, who is a social scientist, okay, even a drone operator, anyone can use GIS. Okay, but yeah, I mean, I'm flattered that I'm being called a GIS expert. My first job, it had no GIS at all. Okay, I was creating maps on PowerPoint. The second job, I did so much of GIS that I mean, it just used to make my eyes water. And post that, I have had almost say 8 years of experience working on different GIS softwares. I'll discuss all these different softwares in the presentation later. And I've been an independent consultant for the last 3 years. And since getting independent, I have switched to QGIS completely. Why? Well, it's free, it's open source, and I had an option to choose. Okay, so these are the three things that made me choose QGIS, and I don't see any other reason, or I don't see any reason to switch back to any of the other proprietary softwares anymore. Okay, so to begin or to go back to the first question I asked, what really is GIS? Would you call this data that you're seeing on screen GIS, right? Is it GIS really? I don't see any location data, or is there? What about the names of countries? Can that be a potential location data? It could be, right? So this also could be some information that can be geographically located. Okay, so that's what GIS is. What we are seeing is the same data has been now represented as a map, as something what we call a thematic map. Okay, I hope by the end of the session, you'll also be able to create something similar. Okay. What other information can we visualize? So for example, here you can see that the rivers all across the world have been visualized here along with their drainage basin, right? Any data that you see in my presentation, if you find it interesting, you can always check for the link somewhere and you can go back and check how the data was created. Okay. We can show, so earlier I showed you lines, right? These are basically rivers. Then you have locations, right? Now, so this map is created again by a user on Google Maps, okay? Google Maps free platform, where he has marked all the capitals of each and every country. Okay, so these are all point locations. So this is also a form of geographical information system. So let's do a quick exercise. Now again, I want you to put in your answers in the chat box. Okay. Each one of you maybe can take one of these, what we call features. Okay. So forest is a type of a feature, power line, wind turbines, lakes. And now I want you to suggest certain attributes or certain data that can be attached to these different features. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Remember, I showed you this map of the world, and we have population data and we have names. Similarly, there's some information that you can attach along with these features. So I want you to put down, say, the feature forest, and then give me all the different attributes that you can think of quickly in the chat box. Okay, while you guys put in that, I'm just reading the chat. I was about to say Simplest Placer, Google Maps, Ola, Uber, Zomato. Perfect, Amit. Rajam is saying, I used to do mapping in my civil engineering project on ArcGIS. Excellent. As a civil engineer, I had never thought of, say, making a career in mapping or using any kind of software like this. So you're really lucky that you're starting very early. Okay, quickly, answers in the chat box. I'm going back to the presentation. Forest, power lines, what features do you think, what attributes do you think can a forest feature have? What I'll do is I'll just quickly put down an example so that it's easier to understand. Say, you put name of the forest. You can say type of the forest, right? You can say area. What else? Status. The legal status. So is it a national park? Is it a UNESCO World Heritage Site? It can be a yes, no column also. So this is an example. Forest equal to 3. No, that's not what I'm looking for. Ananya, you've got it right. Types of forest distribution in the world. Think again. I'm talking about just a feature called forest. What all information? Say if there's a forest area in your locality, okay? What all information you can include as part of that feature? Type of vegetation is correct. Animals, possibly, yes. Okay, power line, electrical tower, okay. Okay, guys, you need to try something other than forest now. Remark trees, lighthouse, watchtowers, reserve lands, vegetation. Amit, you've given examples of different types of features. What I would like is what information you can attach or how you can, say, define those features in a more detailed way. Canopy cover? Yeah, possibly. What about water bodies? Again, can name be one of the attributes for your water bodies? Can the area be? Yes. Can you also talk about, say, pollution levels? Okay. Height, area, perimeter, spread, of course. Wind turbine, speed, height, length of turbine. Fantastic. Yes, now you're getting, okay, type of water bodies, depth, perfect. So, switching back to my presentation. Right. So you guys are more or less now understood what I meant by attributes. Okay. The reason why I told you to do this is because when you look at the different attributes that different people come up with, you'll actually realize that our objectives of creating maps, of using GIS are totally different. Okay. Some person might not be interested in, say, the type of forest. He must be just interested in whether the forest is protected or not. say, for example, our decision makers. Our decision makers are more interested to know whether a particular forest is a reserve forest or is it as part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, etc., etc. In power lines, you can have the name of the power line, where it's starting and ending. Often, power lines are named after the voltage that they have. They also can carry the number of cables that are there in the power lines. In wind turbines, you can obviously have the name of the turbine, right? Each turbine might have a unique code that is assigned to it. Uh, the company name, okay, or who is, say, the ownership of the turbine, how much power is it generating on an average, right? Then again, lake, you can say the area, the activities that are allowed or banned, the ownership of the lake, who is managing the lake, is it the municipal authority, is it the forest department, right? Then you have roads. So in roads, again, names. Our politicians always keep renaming roads. So it's a GIS system is a great way to keep track of these changing names. The length of the road, right? A number of lanes. Is it a one way? Is it a two? How many lanes are there? The width of the road. What category? Is it a highway? Is it an internal road? Right? Is it primary, tertiary road? What is it? Rivers, again, where it's starting, ending, the average width, right? Uh, is the river lined, unlined? Okay, does it have a natural wall, etc.? The average depth of the river across different stretches, right? Then for built-up settlements, you can have name, area, the population that is there. Okay, any more answers here? Okay, I guess so. All right. I hope you understood this. Okay. So when we talk about features, right, I gave you examples in the top about, I showed you the world map and these different shapes, lines, points. These are nothing but features, okay? Any basic GIS software has a capability of visualizing, creating, adding, editing these type of features. Features are basically of points, lines, and polygons, right? So here I'm showing the same location, but I'm representing it in different ways. For example, if I have, say, point location data for all the lakes in a particular state, then probably creating polygon for each of these lakes is going to be very difficult for me, and that's not my requirement in any case. Okay, but if I want to say I want to map all the lakes of a city, then probably this polygon is important. In addition, I want to say that after mapping, I want to create an area. I want to calculate the area of those lakes. Then this polygon becomes important. Of course, after I have assessed the area, I can always take this information and put it as an attribute in this point 5. Okay. So I hope this is clear. So when you have multiple features like this, you get a layer. Okay. So I gave you an example of a single lake. When you have multiple lakes, multiple polygons of this lake in a layer called, it can be in a layer called lakes, right? The same way you can create a layer, lakes of India, and you can add as many lakes as points in that layer. Okay, so that's what is making the layer. So you can have a collection of points, lines, polygons. Okay, so that's what makes a layer. So these are just basic terms that you need to understand when you're using any GIS software, not just QGIS. Okay. So what is GIS really used for? The most important thing, it's not for creating maps. It's for asking questions. Okay, that's the most important thing, the most important application of any GIS software, be it open source, be it proprietary. Okay, so these are two examples. Okay, in the first example, this WTG is nothing but wind turbine generator. It's short for wind turbine generator. So what is being done is the noise that is generated from each of these wind turbines has been modeled here. This might not be, say, surveyed data. It might be modeled data. Okay, so based on how much power the motor has or how much big the turbine is, which model of the turbine it is. All this information is can be used to actually create a model of how far and how what is the intensity of noise that's generated, and then you can map this on the location. So you have the wind turbine location, and then you have created, you've overlaid that with this noise model, and how this noise model is also responding to the physical features of the area. If you notice this, these are contours, right? And wherever there are higher contours, the noise is blocked. So this is how overlaying data helps us in GIS. Okay, so basically this will tell us, say, if there are locations R1 and R2, if there are villages, okay, or if there are sensitive receptors like hospitals, or or healthcare centers or villages that can be impacted because of this high noise level, then we can assess how much impact that particular village is going to have. So for example, here, this R1 location will be at, say it will be impacted less as compared to the R2 location, right? Moving to the second example here. So here, they have basically compared the population growth rates along with the red list plants. I'm not sure if you're aware, IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, it publishes a list, it's called a red list, okay, list of species that are threatened, okay, that are about to go extinct, okay, etc. So these species can, what they've done is now they've overlaid with the locations where population growth rates are and the number of red list plants. Okay, so you can see that they are somehow correlated, right? So in this way, you can analyze and take different types of information, overlay them based on just single thing, their geographic location. Based on just their geographic location, you can overlay them and then come out with an answer. Okay, come out or even raise a question that do higher population growth rates mean that higher number of plants are going to go extinct? This is a question that you can answer using GIS, right? Okay, so when we talk about any kind of GIS software, there are certain things that you need to get, understand. So these are some of the terms that I'll quickly discuss. Geoid, ellipsoid, datum. So what basically is a geoid? So when we talk about the Earth's surface, it's not really spherical. Okay, it's not even ellipsoid. It's actually called a geoid because of the various unevenness and the uneven surface of the Earth. Okay, because of that, it's called a geoid. And what we try to do is we are doing a kind of approximation. We are trying to find the exact location of a particular place. But for that, we cannot use a geoid because there is too much variation on the Earth's surface. So what we use these ellipsoids as a reference. So we create an ellipsoid and we try to fit the geoid such that the ellipsoid matches. Okay, and when you have a global sort of a geoid that you can use as a global reference, it's called a global datum. Then you have the local datum where you can have multiple ellipsoids that try and match the actual surface of the Earth. For example, here, if you notice, there are multiple ellipsoids that are trying to match the curvature and the unevenness of the Earth's surface. Okay, it's something similar to looking at yourself in this kind of a mirror. Okay, I'm sure you guys have seen. In some location, in some area in that mirror, you will find that you are looking just the way you are. But in other locations, you will find that there are distortions. So that's what happens because of these assumptions or because of assuming that Earth is basically an ellipsoid. Okay. So why do we actually need this? We need this to actually locate things accurately on Earth's surface. So when you talk about a latitude and longitude, it's nothing but a coordinate reference system that we are using. Okay, and what does it have? It will have the longitude, latitude, and the altitude. One example of a coordinate reference system is the World Geodetic System, which is WGS 84. Okay, 84 stands for 1984. Okay, and the other type of system is called a projected system. So projected system can have different units other than your standard degrees. Okay, in case of geographic system, you basically, the units are basically degrees. Okay, one example of a projected system is a UTM system. Okay, or Universal Transverse Mercator. Okay, why am I discussing these things with you? Because this is really important to understand when you want to map any information. When you're using, if you want to map or if you want to create maps of this type, where you have the entire world in a 2D format, you can use a geographic coordinate system. When you have something like this, where you have a very location oriented data, you want to calculate distances. For example, here also I want to calculate distances perhaps from here, right? Or you want to even calculate areas. If you want to calculate areas, then you need a system where, say, the measurements are in meters. Okay, so in that case, you can use a projected coordinate system. Okay, so what basically is a projected coordinate system? It uses something called as map projections to represent your real world objects onto a two-dimensional surface. Okay, so what basically we are doing is, we are taking our geoid, we are projecting the locations onto some kind of say openable surface. Okay, so for example, here this is a cone. Okay, I can just cut the cone from the middle over here, and I can open it out to create a map like this, a two-dimensional map like this. The same with this. Okay, and here a cylindrical projection. Okay, so here I can just cut this cylinder from here and open out the map to get something like this. But when you actually look at this map closely, you realize that the map is these actually areas and locations are often distorted. Okay, a nice example to actually check this is over here. You can just maybe afterwards you can check this out. You can just click this link, and there's a nice puzzle where you can actually move different features of these these outlines of the countries. And when you move it towards, say, the equator, you'll find the shape changes, and when you move it towards the poles, the shape changes. Okay, just you can have it a go later. So. These projections are the most basic thing you need to understand with any GIS software. So when you talk about GIS softwares, I have used a couple of softwares. Now this I've listed based on how I came in contact with these different softwares. I want you guys to list out something similar in the chat box. I want you to tell me which are the GIS softwares that you have used till now, in the order that you've used it. Okay, the very first time I started using GIS was through Google Earth. Then I started using, as a student, I started using ArcGIS. I realized ArcGIS was not capable of doing a lot of remote sensing tasks. Now it is, but then I switched to Idrisi for doing certain remote sensing tasks like land use, land cover classification, etc. I also used a little bit of AirDAS Imagine, which is supposed to be the most, it's the say the most preferred, you can say, remote sensing software. There's also a small software program called Ilvis. Okay, it's created by the University of Twente. It's again freely downloadable. You can just go to their website and download it. And then finally, I came to QGIS, and QGIS was, say, about 4 or 5 years ago when I actually started tinkering with QGIS, and just about 3 years ago I completely switched on to QGIS. Through QGIS, I came to know of other open source softwares like Grass, Saga, and JIDAL, which is actually at the heart of most of the proprietary and open source software. JIDAL is the one. And then again, the latest one is Google Earth Engine. Okay. So have you guys listed out the GIS softwares? Okay, no answers yet. I'll give you guys more time. You can just do that. Till then, I'll move to the next slide. Okay, so why open source GIS? Okay, why QGIS? Okay, so if like I said, so JIDAL is one program, and this is actually at the heart of a lot of software. So you can see here QGIS, GRASS, ArcGIS, Python, R. Okay, all of these are using JIDAL. What JIDAL does, it gives you the ability of, say, understanding these different formats, converting these different formats, okay, and doing some kind of analysis with these different formats. Okay, but JIDAL is actually open source. So when I say open source, what exactly is open source? Say there's a community behind JIDAL who uh, who volunteer and who in their free time keep on coding and building these different softwares up. Okay, that's how QGIS has been created. You can actually check out this link where he talks about 10 reasons to stop using ArcGIS and start using QGIS. Okay, you can just have a look at that. He gives some interesting reasons. One of the reasons is that QGIS is made by good people. On a more serious note, it's you need to really learn about QGIS and look at the huge community that is and the efforts that go into actually creating such a beautiful software. Okay, so please, you can have a look at that. So one more reason why I love QGIS is the way it handles different formats. Okay, so this was a graphic I took from this link. You can just check the link out. But that this graphic didn't actually have QGIS. So I just decided, okay, let's try and see what happens with QGIS. Now these are just few formats that are most commonly used. Okay, but QGIS can handle them easily. You can just drag and drop these files directly in QGIS and it will just open. You don't need to do anything. Probably for DWG, you have conversion plugins, but it's really easy to directly open in QGIS. Okay, so this is another reason why I love QGIS. It can just open any kind of format. Okay. A few years back, the Open Geospatial Consortium, they came out with the Geo package. Okay, and QGIS being an open source software, it was quickly incorporated into QGIS, and Geo package is really powerful. For those who have used, say, ISRI format or the shapefile format, you know that with every shapefile, there are some four files that are created, right? A geo package is like you can say a package. It's like a basket where you can hold all your fruits so that you don't fruits don't fall off. Okay, so geo package allows you to store different things from features, rasters, from styles, even tiling layers. Okay, all of that can be stored in a single geo package. I'll demonstrate how geo package works also. So like I said, you can store features, rasters, styles, symbology or styling files, and even QGIS project files. Okay. All right. So, so when you talk about QGIS, there are a couple of things you need to know. QGIS has an excellent say documentation. Okay. So I have provided links in this slide. You can maybe when you want to try it out, you can download QGIS from this link, right? The latest version is the 3.18 version. Okay, I would recommend that you install the LTR or the long-term version. Okay, because that's the most stable, right? There's also a link to install plugins. Okay, so plugins are actually the heart of GIS. There are a few core plugins that ship with QGIS. When you download QGIS, those plugins are already installed, and there are a lot of optional plugins that you can download. Okay, so some of my favorite plugins, I have created a video of to download and install those plugins. So you can just click this link and see how to install them. Okay. Finally, the documentation, QGIS has its own documentation, is very detailed. You can check the training manual. Okay, and there's also a gentle introduction to QGIS, which is really excellent. You can check out that, where it's in a tutorial and a step-by-step format. You can start doing different things. Finally, there's also third party, there's also this amazing tutorials that are created by another user. And these are really extensive, and you can pretty much learn everything in QGIS that you need from these tutorials. So do check these out. Okay. Uh, what we'll be doing is I'll be showing quick demos, and hopefully I'll be able to cover all those demos before we move on to the question and answer. Okay. Um, so like I said, there are a lot of plugins in QGIS. Okay. And this is just a screenshot of my plugin repository, but these are just a few plugins that I've installed. The most, say, these are some of the most used plugins, you can say. I personally love these plugins. So you can install these plugins, Quick Map Services, Quick OSM. I'll be demonstrating some part of these plugins today. Okay. Right. So I'll be starting the demos. Before that, are there any questions so far? Okay. Google Earth, QGIS, Pix4D Mapper, excellent. Snap Sentinel. Oh, I missed that, Sushmita. Okay, excellent. Yeah. My supervisor processing SAR images. Excellent. Snap, ArcGIS, QGIS, AirDAS, and PCI, Google Earth Engine, Google Earth Pro. Okay, so we've got a lot of experts here. Google Pix, oh, Amit has actually used a lot of softwares that I have not even heard of. Excellent. iDesktop 2020, Supermap. Okay, I haven't heard of that. Okay. GDAL in Python, excellent. QGIS, just to make everything different dimensions. Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you guys for sharing that. All right. If you have any questions, you can put them down in the chat, and maybe we can come to those later. What I'll do is I'll quickly start with the demo right now. So I've also provided, I think most of you must have got the link that I've provided for the presentation. Also, if you move to this slide called demos, you'll also find this link. So this is a WeTransfer link. So I request you to download the data in a week's time. After that, this will disappear. So I think it's about 400 MB. So please download this. Okay. So what also along with the demos, what I've done is for the few basic functions, I've tried to create these kind of GIFs so that it's easier to follow. Okay. And you can refer to these later. I'm sure Dr. Ruchi will share the recording also, but you can easily refer to this here. And yeah, okay, QGIS has started. Right, so this is, I think I'll just have to reshare once. Okay, I hope it's visible, the interface. So this is the basic QGIS interface that you see. Some of these you might not be able to see, some of these toolbars you might not be able to see. It's easy to switch toolbars on and off. So these are your toolbars. There's an option to switch on and off toolbars over here. Okay, you can, these are the installed toolbars, and these can be switched on and off. Panels are coming on the left and right hand side. You can also put them down here. So that way panels are very flexible. I personally like to have panels tabbed like this. Okay. The most important panels you need to keep in mind are the browser panel. Okay. Where you can directly go to your wherever your files are stored, and you can load it into your layers. The layers panel is where you can put in your features, your rasters, all your data, and to be visualized here. Okay, right now this is your map area. Okay, so once you start putting layers here, they will start becoming visible here. This is a nifty addition called layer styling panel. It's really good where you can change the style and it immediately shows up here. Okay, and we'll see how it works. To begin with, I'm going to show you quickly where I go and install my plugins. Okay, so here under plugins, there's something called as manage and install plugins. And here you can see all the installed plugins. Okay. If you want to search for more plugins, you can click on all and you can just search for the plugins that you want. Remember the plugins that I told you was Quick Map Services, Quick OSM. Okay, it's there in the slide, so you can look at that later. In case you don't want the plugins to load when you open QGIS, that can sometimes slow down QGIS. So you can keep them off. Okay, so you can just switch off these plugins once your work is done. You can switch them on. Okay, so I'm just switching this on here. So I have the Quick Map Services plugin. This shows a brief description of what the Quick Map Service and Quick OSM plugin does. Okay, you can always upgrade. There's an option to upgrade plugin here. Once there's an upgrade available, you can directly upgrade the plugin from here. If you want to uninstall the plugin, you can do it from here. Okay, and say if I want to install some plugin, I can just click on install plugin. All right, I hope that's clear. Remember, click on all and then search for your plugins. For example, I want to see a plugin called semi-automatic classification plugin. So it's here. I found it. I'm going to switch this on. Sometimes plugins directly show up. For example, here you can see there is a SCP doc, semi-automatic classification plugin doc. So that doc appears here. Sometimes the plugins won't be visible. They'll appear like a small button or they will get embedded in the menu. Okay, so you can check for information over here where those plugins actually get installed or where you can access those plugins from this location here. Okay, I'm right now going to close this. Okay, I'm going to start with the first plugin. It's called the Quick Map Services plugin. Okay, now before I show you the plugin, the very first thing that you need to do is create a new project. Okay, just like ArcGIS, you can create projects in QGIS. Projects will store all the information of styles and all the layers in a file. Okay, it's not going to zip all your layers. Your layers can be in different locations. It will just save the links to those. Okay, so I'm going to click on new project over here. All right, and now what I want to do is I'll start first with the plugins. Okay, so I'll go to the Quick Map Services plugin. It gets installed here. You can access it from web and Quick Map Services. What Quick Map Services allows you to do is it allows you to load different base maps. If you've already installed this plugin, okay, then sometimes you won't be able to see so many layers, so many base maps. So to do that, you have to go to settings. Okay, and under settings, you go to more services, click on get contributed pack. Once that's done, click on save. Once that's done, you will get this huge link. Oh, okay, my QGIS has crashed. Never mind, I'll just open it again. Yeah, so I do have the demo here as a GIF, so you can just check. So once you click on get contributed pack, okay, you will get all these different layers. What I'll do now is I'll start adding one of those layers. Let's see, I want to add Google Maps. Okay, now even in Google Maps, I've got options of adding different things. I can just add the base satellite image, okay, without any labels. I can add just the labels. Okay, I can add a hybrid map, okay, terrain map. So let me just add a hybrid map. Okay, Now remember I told you about projections or the coordinate reference system. So there are two things that you need to remember. Each and every file that you load in a GIS software, that needs to have the coordinate reference system for that file needs to be specified in the file. Okay. If it is a standard GIS file, uh, the file it's defined by default. So if you have say a shape file, an ArcGIS shape file, then it will be stored in a file called .prj, okay, projection file. Uh, you also need to think about what projection your workspace is in. So how you can change that? So there's a small button here, right? It shows the current coordinate reference system, okay, for your project. I can just click this, and here I can select the CRS, okay. For example, I gave you an example of UTM, okay. In the files that I have shared with you, I also have shared this folder called free GIS data, okay. In that, I have something called as UTM zones. So what this is having, it's basically giving you which zone your location falls into. You can find out easily using this KML file. This opens it in Google Earth, or you can just drag and drop it in QGIS and it will open up in QGIS. As you can see, this is showing the UTM zones. Okay, so this is UTM zone number 45, row R. Okay, so you can always select the zones here. Say for example, UTM zone 45. Be careful here. Remember, the datum that you have to choose is always WGS84. If you want to know more about datums, you can go back to the slide, the presentation, and there I have a link to understand datums. You can check it out. When you click on this zone, it will show you where exactly this zone is. As you can see, the 45N zone is located here. So if your project is located in this area, you can blindly select this. You can select this, okay? Here, you'll get all the information. As you can see, the datum that it uses is World Geodetic System 1984, right? And it's also going to tell you what unit it is using. Can you see here? The unit it's using is meters. Okay. So this UTM CRS you can use when you want to calculate areas, distances. Okay, when your project area is really small and it fits into this location, this thing, you can use it. Okay. Right now, I'm not going to use this. The other thing you have to remember is whenever you load the file here, by default, QGIS changes the project CRS to the CRS of that file. So keep that in mind when you are using QGIS. Okay. What I'm going to do is quickly now I'm going to show you some other things that you can add. So these are again base maps. What if you have some drone data that you have stored in some online location? I'm going to give you an example of the open aerial maps data. Okay, so open aerial maps is one such website where you can get some open source drone data or aerial data. Okay, you can check out this link later and just put it down in the chat box. The link of the presentation, I'm sharing it again. Okay, so what I've done is I have now used, I've copied a location for the open aerial map. Okay, and I'm going to use this as a web mapping tile service. Okay, so what it does is it fetches the data from the server, okay, and it shows you, displays it here. So it can again be used only as a base map. Okay, you can't really do a lot of analysis on this, but this is a useful feature if you want to say digitize certain features or locate certain features using say already georeference drone data. Then you can use this. So what I'll do is in my folder I have created these exercises. Here there's called loading data WMTS. So I'll just click on this. Here, there's a text file called Open Aerial Map. Okay, what you can do is you can just copy this link. If you want to load some other data, you can again explore the openaerialmap.org. Okay, I'll go back to my QGIS. I'll right click on WMS, click on New Connection. Okay, I'll write the name as okay, and I'll paste the location. I'm going to leave these things as it is. Click on OK. Switch out this. Okay. And here, as you can see, under the browser itself, you'll find that this link has been created and shows me the name of the data that was uploaded. Okay, I'm going to double. So whenever you want to load any data from the browser to your layers, this data is not really visible right now. What you can do is right-click this. You can say add layer to project, or you can even export or save the layer to some other file from here. Okay, but I'm right now going to add the layer to the project. When I click on that, comes here. Okay. Okay. You can also double click on this, or you can just drag and drop it to this layers. I'm going to right click and I'm going to click on zoom to layer. As soon as you do that, it's going to zoom to the location. Let me just open Google Hybrid again. As you can see, this is already georeference data, means that someone has already provided the locations and located this data accurately. So as you can see, it gives me, so here I have obtained a high resolution, say drone image for this location. Okay. If you want now, you can start digitizing this layer, right? So what we'll do is, before we move to digitization, I want to show you another plugin. It's called Quick OSM. Okay, I'm sure you guys have heard of OpenStreetMaps. Okay, so OpenStreetMaps is again a community-driven project where people keep digitizing and creating new layers. Okay, so we can actually access those layers and download. For example, in Google Earth or Google Maps, you can't really download this data. Okay, you can't download this location directly. Okay, but OSM allows us to do that. There's a plugin called Quick OSM. Okay, when you install the plugin, you'll find these two buttons that are created. Sorry, just make it a little less cluttered. Yeah. So what you can see is you can see these buttons that are created. You can also access this under the plugins menu. Oh, is it? Certain plugins. Oh, sorry, it's in vector menu. Okay, it's under vector menu and it's called Quick OSM. I'm going to click on Quick OSM here, and this dialog box will open. So under OpenStreetMaps, there are several layers that are created, and you can use these fields to filter from these layers. Okay, so let's see. What I want to do is I want to see if there are any highways. Okay, near this location. Let's see. So there is a key called highway. That's great. Let's see if there is. Yeah, so there's a key called primary. You can always just click on this drop down and select whichever you want. Right now I'm selecting primary. Okay, you can select for which location this query should be run. So I'll just click on canvas extend. Canvas extend means it's going to take the bounds of this canvas, okay, that you see here, and it's going to run the query. So I'll just click on run query, and immediately you'll see that it's loaded some layers. These are shape files, or say vector data, not exactly shape files, but this is vector data. All right. I don't really want this. So what I can do is I can just select, and there's an option to remove the layer. I can even right click and click on remove layer. Okay. So I've actually got a file which is supposed to be the highway. Let me just switch on Google Hybrid and check. Okay. So yeah, it's actually an highway here. Okay, let me see. Now this is just not a feature, but it also is having some information. Okay, so as you can see here, it is giving information about whether it's a one-way or not. Okay, it's also giving you name of the road, the level or the primary levels. Okay, whether there's a bridge or not. Okay, so this is not a single file. Like I told you, this layer has multiple features. So for example, if I select this, you notice something has got highlighted here. Okay. What I'll do is I will just quickly show you how to change. Maybe I can increase the thickness. I've selected this. Layer styling panel has been on. You can switch it on and off by clicking on the F7 key. Okay. I'll change this. I'll increase the width, right? So it's more visible. We'll make it a little darker. All right. And now you can clearly see it's showing me the selected line. So this is where our bridge is. Remember, it's saying yes for bridge. So this is where our bridge is, and this is a separate feature. Okay, within this layer, this is a separate feature. So in case if you have several features like these and you want to find out where all the bridges are, okay, you can always use something like a filter, okay, and say bridge yes. Okay, what it will do, it's going to filter features or select features which is having all the bridges. So right now there's only one feature, so it's giving me all the information about that feature. Okay, so that's how you can select or search for anything. Okay, there are options to say I already have selected something here. If I want to deselect, I can go here on the top. There is a toolbar here. It's called a selection toolbar. I can just click on deselect features from all layers and it will get deselected. I can even select features manually. So I can just click here and I can select the feature. Okay. I'll use the pan button again, left click to pan. Okay. Now what we'll do is we've added, say, the highway. I want to do some analysis. Now, say highways, there can be a lot of accidents that happen on highways. So how can we check whether the highway is highly vulnerable in terms of, say, accident deaths due to, say, accidents? Okay, how can you check that? Maybe what we can do is we can create a proxy of, say, which are the nearest hospitals. Okay, where are the nearest hospitals? How can we do that? The same way we can go back to either what we can do is we can switch on Google Hybrid. We can check wherever the hospital, wherever you can see hospitals, and you can start manually marking hospitals, or we can check if OSM already has that data. I'll go back to my OSM, quick OSM, and again raise a query on, I think it's under amenities. Let me just check. Yeah, hospital. Okay. Now here, either I can load hospital for the entire area, Okay, or I can load it for the extents of this road. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll say layer extent and I'll say highway. Okay, so it's going to load all the hospitals that are within the extent of this road. Let me see. Let me run a query. Right. So it seems there are just 2 hospitals here. So if there are any accidents happening over here, probably it's going to be difficult to reach a hospital, right? So in such a way, you can really analyze which portions of your highway can be more vulnerable. Okay, with respect to say availability of nearest healthcare centers. Okay, what more can you do? You can also check whether there are hospitals within a certain buffer area of your road. Okay, so how can we do that? Buffer is a inbuilt function under vectors. Okay, under geoprocessing tools, you got buffers. In case you're not able to see any of these tools, sometimes what happens is the plugins, the processing plugins just shuts down automatically. So what you can do is you can just switch it on and off. Okay, this is the processing plugin, which is the core plugin in QGIS. You can just switch it on and off. Okay, now the basic thing you need to remember first is you have to check whether you can use directly create a buffer for this. Okay, so let's see. I'll go to vector geoprocessing buffer. Okay, here under buffer, I'm going to select highways. Okay, but here it is giving me this warning. Okay, distance is in geographic degrees. So it's going to be problem for me if I put 10 degrees. 10 degrees is a huge distance. Okay, to put it in meters, it's really difficult to convert very accurately into meters. Okay, it's something like 0.0008333 something degrees. Okay, so instead of doing this, what I need to do, I will have to reproject this layer and save it in a different projection. I have to reproject this. So what I'll do, I'll quickly reproject this. Okay. Remember here, when you see this memory symbol, these are all temporary layers. So when the quick OSM plugin works, it always exports, it creates layers as temporary layers. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, export, save feature as. Okay. Remember I told you about this nice thing called GeoPackage. Let's try and save it as a GeoPackage. So I'll go to File and I'll create a new folder called Output or OP. And here I'm going to say okay. Save. Now the file name is different. Remember, it's a package. The layer name will be different. Remember, it's a highway. Highway. And here I get an option to change the CRS. I'll change the CRS to I think it is 45 north. Okay, and I'm going to click on OK. And here you can see now a permanent layer called Kathmandu Highway has been created. Here, I'll just say, so when you want to see the GeoPackages in your browser, you can just right click on GeoPackage, create new connection. Okay, click on Kathmandu and click on Open. Okay, so under GeoPackage, now you'll see Kathmandu as a GeoPackage, and under Kathmandu, you will find this highway layer that you had loaded. All right. Now what we'll do is, now we'll quickly create a buffer for this. I'll select the right layer. Now it's not showing me the warning. I'll say kilometers and I'll say, or maybe I'll say just meters, and I'll say 500 meters. To see how many hospitals are there within the distance of 500 meters from the highway. Okay, so for that, I'll create a buffer called a buffer with 500 meter distance. Right now, I'll say this is a temporary layer. You can run. And here you can see a buffer has been created. This is my layer. QGIS has this really nice function to copy the styles. Okay, remember we had created some style, we had changed the thickness and everything. So I can just right click this and go to styles. I can say copy all styles, and I can right click on this and I can say paste styles. And immediately I'll get this. I don't want this layer. This was the earlier layer. I'll remove it to avoid confusion. And now you can see that I've got a highway layer. Okay, now, so as you can see here, both of these are actually within 500 meter, right? What else I can do is I can, if I have multiple location like these, I can easily select based on this buffer location. Okay. Right. Now, one another easy way to actually save a shapefile. So this is currently just a vector file. If I want to save it as part of the geo package, what I can do is I can just drag this and drop it into my geo package here. It will say import was successful. Now, when you see this, you will find that buffered and highway is already there in the geo package. Okay. What more can I do? Remember, I told you can save a project. So I can just go to project. I can say save to. I can say geo package. It's showing me the connection here. So I'll just select the connection. Okay, click on OK. Oh, I'll just. And okay. And now when I refresh this, there's a refresh button here. You'll find that this is loaded. The project is now saved in this geo package layer. Let's check how the geo package looks. Going back to my output layer, you can see that there are just 3 files, and that also because right now certain layers are already loaded. If I close this file, this project, then you'll find that there's just one file, which is .gpkg. Okay. The good part is that you don't have to worry about multiple files, multiple layers. Okay. The bad part is that you will need some or the other GIS program to actually see what's inside this geo package. Okay. Just to show you what happens when you save it as a shapefile, I'll just click on Save Feature As. I'll change it to shapefile. I'll save the layer here as buffer. Okay, if you guys must have noticed, I'm putting a lot of underscores. I'm using a lot of underscores. That's because any kind of GIS software you work on, the space becomes a special character. Okay, and it can cause certain problems when you shift the data, move the data, in loading or reading the data. So it's always better to avoid putting spaces in any of your file names, your layer names. Always don't add spaces. You can either add underscore or you can just add a hyphen. Okay, so I'll just click on save. I'm not going to change anything. Click on OK. And now you can see that a buffer layer is added. Okay, here. And this is not visible in your geo package. But if I open this file, now you can see that there are these multiple files that are created for a shapefile. Okay, and all of these files, if you're moving anything, always remember you'll have to move all these files together. Otherwise, you will end up losing your data. So you have to be really careful with shapefiles. Okay. All right. What we'll now do is, okay, so we'll move to one of the exercises that I've created. When you download this, you'll find these different folders. Now I'm going to move to, okay, before we move, I'll just show you how to quickly edit and add certain features to your document. Okay, so you can just right click here, you can click on toggle editing. Okay, and there's a button here to do that also, toggle editing. And you can say add line features, or if you want to edit an existing line feature, for example, this highway, then you can just say edit. Yeah, this vertex tool. So you can just click on this. I'll just say add line feature. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to add a certain roads in this layer. Okay, of course I have named this highway. It would be wrong to add some different roads to this highway. But maybe what I can do is I can add this road that's going along this route. This looks big enough to be a highway. Okay. Always remember, whenever you're digitizing any kind of networks, when I say networks, we're talking about roads, rivers, okay, where there's a certain flow. In case of roads, there is traffic flow. In case of rivers, there's water flow. So any kind of networks, you have to remember certain rules. Okay. Always remember to end say end your networks at junctions. Okay, and always remember, avoid any dead ends for your networks. So for example, this is a dead end. It should always be connected. If it's not, then your network is incomplete. Okay. Now there's a nice tool called snapping. Okay, so you can go and start your snapping toolbar here. What it does is it allows you to quickly snap to layers. So for example, I'll just zoom in here. As you can see, when I move towards here, it will show me a vertex. So I can click on this vertex and I can start digitizing. I can click on my scroll wheel and hold and pan, and I can continue digitizing. Remember, at junctions, I can create a vertex and I can keep digitizing this as I go along. Once I'm done, I can right click and it will ask me if I want any kind of attributes that I want to add. So I don't really know the name. So, oh, the name is here, Aranico Highway. So I can just write the name here. Right? I can add any other data that I want. Is it a one-way? No. All and click on OK. Once I've done that, you'll find that this is loaded here. When you see something like this is your form view. You can switch to a table view here, and here you can see that a new feature has been created called Aranico. Okay. Now remember, you need to save this, so I'll just stop editing and click on save. You can also click this button here called save edits. Okay, so this is how you edit. The same process you can follow for any kind of polygon or points. Okay. All right, now I'm going to quickly move to seeing how you can use rasters. Okay, I'm going to use a plugin called SRTM plugin, the SRTM downloader. This SRTM downloader helps us download SRTM data, which is elevation data. Okay, so I can just zoom out into the area for which I want the SRTM data. I can say set canvas extent over here, and I just can click on download. Once I do that, it's going to show me the progress. Okay. All right. Now, remember, you need to have these credentials if you want to download SRTM data. I'll just paste this back in the chat box so you can register later. Seems right now it's not saved my credentials. Never mind. What I'll do is I'll actually add data that I had already used before, and I'll zoom into it. So once you download that data, you will see something similar to this. This is actually also, I have downloaded two SRTM images. I have merged them and I've done some kind of processing on them. Okay, but I'll quickly show you what you can do. This is a raster data. What I mean by raster data, this is each of these pixels represents the height at that particular location. I'm sorry. Okay. So here you can see it's showing me the pixel size is 30 by 30, which is nothing but 30 meters by 30 meters. The unit is in meters. Okay. It shows me the basic statistics. So the highest point in this small raster is about 1,327 meters high. Okay, the lowest point is around 98 meters. Okay, so you can get different statistics under information. There are certain tools where you can easily extract contours. So I can just say contour under raster. Okay, and I can put in my input layer. I can say the number of intervals. Okay, and I can just click on run. And it will generate 10-meter contours from me based on the location data. Okay, being a large area, it might take some time. Maybe what I can do is, oh yeah, it's generated. So once it's generated, it's going to show me all the details. It's going to show me where the output, it saves it as a geo package. Okay, and here you can see I've got a detailed 10-meter contour. Okay. I can do some edits for this. There are by default options. You can visualize contours, but not export. So I'll just click on Hillshade. Now this gives me a three-dimensional kind of an effect to the contour. Okay. So these are some of the features, some of the tools that you can use for your raster data. Okay. Along with the SRTM download, there's a very beautiful tool that has been created in QGIS called the semi-automatic classification plugin. So I'm just going to click on this and show you what different things are possible in this. So this is again a plugin specifically for remote sensing, right? And here you can directly download band sets. Again, you need to also be signed up with those websites, with different websites before you start. But you can always download products. These are the websites that you need to have, need to be registered with, and these are free to register. You can do that, and you can search your land cover, your Landsat, Sentinel, okay, Modis, all of these data from here. You can run different. You can do different pre-processing for different satellite images. You can do multiple. You can clip multiple rasters. You can do classification using different algorithms, okay, and there is also unsupervised classification that you can do, okay. Lot of post-processing that is possible through this. So this is another amazing plugin. You can just check it out, and there is it's got a very good say documentation. You can just click on help and it will open up that documentation in the browser. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to cover as much as I can in the limited time that I have. All right. So I have already created certain. I have created certain data for you, which you can try your hand with. Just to quickly check, Dr. Ruchi, how much time do I have left?
How much time do you need?
Okay. Maybe I'll just continue and I'll stop in another 5-10 minutes. Okay.
No problem.
So I've also provided you this this folder called air quality visualization. Here I'm using the new feature that QGIS has developed. It's called temporal control panel. Okay, so here you can actually load temporal data. What I've done is I have downloaded pollution data for Pune city. Okay, and this is a single day pollution data, and this is having the PM10 data. Okay, and what I've done is I've basically I have animated the data over the entire day. So now you know at which station where you're getting very poor or severe air quality. Okay, so let's see how that looks. So you can see it is showing me the values, the air quality index value, and it's also showing me the color which represents severe, very poor, poor. Okay, you can find information on how you can actually do this in a file here called, there's a readme file. You can just refer that and try to replicate this. Okay. Next, what I'm going to show you is quickly I'm going to show you how to create a thematic map. Okay. So for that, I'll use data that I have here. So this is ward level information. Okay, this is ward level information that I have. If I just click on open attribute table, it shows me what all information is included in this wards. Okay. Now I can even edit the tables and remove the information that I don't want. Okay, so how I can do that? I can click on the toggle editing mode. I can click on delete fields and I can select, say, I just want population data. What I've done is I've attached the population data. Okay, so I just want the population data, which is this. I don't want the other data. So I'll just hold the shift key and select all. Actually, you don't need to hold the shift key. You can just select all of them. So it will remove all of this data and just click on OK. Now you can see that it's removed all this information. Okay, and I'll save this. Okay, now what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and calculate the area of these wards. I don't know the area of these wards. Let me first check whether this is in the right CRS. So this is in WGS 844326. Okay, so it's not in the right CRS, but never mind. We'll just go along right now. Generally, it's better that it's in UTM projection. Okay, I'll show you the steps of how you can calculate area for all the wards together. Okay, so first you create a new field called area. Keep that as a decimal real number. Precision, I'm going to leave it as it is. Now I've got something called as area. Okay. Now here you can see that there is a section here. When you're editing, this becomes activated. I'll click on area and I'll just type in $area. So if there is no error in the formula, then you can see that it's no more red. I can just click on update all and you'll find that it's calculated my area. As you know, this might be in meters, square meters. Okay, so to convert this to hectares, all I need to do is divide by 10,000. Okay, and still area I can update, and now I've got area in hectares. To save, remember I have to save edits. Stop editing. So I've got the area, right? Once this is done, I'll show you quickly how you can actually change how your map looks based on what you have in your attribute table. So how do you do that? So under layer styling, you can select, right now this is selected. I can select categorized. Okay, don't worry if this disappears. I can select the value here. So here you can see, okay, unfortunately, okay, instead of categorized, I'll go to graduated because I want to represent this based on population. So I'll see graduated and I'll say area. Okay, right now it shows only these columns for graduated. Once I click on classify, it's going to show me based on the varying area. It's going to show me, it's going to say visual. I will be able to visualize the layers, right? What if I want to visualize the population? I can't see the population here. The reason for that is it's not in numerical format. It's in text format. Okay. So if you notice here, you can see it shows ABC. It's a string. So the very first thing I need to do is to convert this from a string to a numerical format. For that, I need to again edit. I can't directly change this column. So I need to create a new column which says whole number, which says population. Click on OK. Okay, so this is a whole number with population data. And now I'm just going to say, now if I want to add this name, what I can do is I can directly type in this name, or I can go to the equation box here. It's going to open the expression editor. The expression editor is really powerful in QGIS. All I need to do is check under fields and you'll find my field here. I want to copy the same fields that are there, but I want them to be in numerical format, right? So I'll just double click this and you'll see this is coming here. I'll click on OK and I'll say update all. So now I've got a numerical field called population. I click on save. I'll stop editing. Let me see if this is visible now. I'll go to graduated and yes, now you can see population is visible. I can say classify and now based on population, I can create a classification. Okay. Great. I think I have mostly covered everything. The last part is how to create a map. So here, there is something called as show layout manager. So I'm going to click on this. Okay, I'll say create. I'll just write pop. Okay, right. And now I get a new window, which is my layout manager with a blank page. Okay. To add any kind of element, I can use this toolbar over here. So to add a map, I'll just click on add map. Okay, I'll just. So my map has been added. If I want in the background, the base map, I can select the base map here. Okay, it's not updated here. There are other options to update it. So yeah, so now this is updated. If you don't want it to update, you can just lock the layers here. Okay. And now any changes you do here, it's not going to get updated on this. Okay. The next thing I want to add is I want to add a legend. So I'll just click on the legend here. You can see there's an option to add a legend. I'll just drag. I don't really need the air quality option here. Okay, but this legend is switched to auto update again. So I'll switch off this auto update and I'll remove this. I don't think I want this also. So I'll just remove this. So I've got a small legend. If I want, I can add a title to this legend. Okay, so I've got a legend. It's always a good idea to add a scale. So I'll just click on the scale here and add a scale. I can change how my scale looks. Okay, there are different options. Okay, so I can always change how my scale looks. I can add a north arrow. Okay, there are a lot of symbols here to choose from. Okay, don't worry if this N is not seen. This is an SVG symbol. So all you need to do is, since this north arrow is not seen, I can just change the fill color and now it will be visible. You can also add any kind of text. So if I want to add a title to this map, I can just add population data. And I can change the font. I can increase the font here. Okay. So if you want, you can add information about the map as to how this map was created, right? And what data was used. Say you're using Esri, data, you're using the census data from 2011, all of that information can be added. Census data 2000. All of this information is map as is, and you can easily export this. Okay. Oh, of course, there are certain features that also can be added to the map. These are some things that you'll always require. Say if you want to add the latitude and longitude, then you can click on, you can add grids. Okay. And here I'll just change. Right, I can change how much distance I want. Okay. If I want any frames, if I want the coordinates to show, I can add that. I can change the orientation of the coordinates. You can see here, it's changing the orientation. I can also change the precision of coordinates and see if I want okay. I can change the format. Okay, so right, and then you can obviously export the map. You can export it as an image, a PDF, a geospatial PDF, okay, which has location data along. Okay, I think that's about it. I've tried to cover most of the aspects as quickly as possible. You can check out these GIFs for more information, and there is obviously some homework that you can try out. One is try and recreate the pollution animation that I have made for you. I have the steps given in the TXT file, or the other option that you can do is you can calculate the population density for each ward. Remember, it's, we visualize the population, but it's always a good idea to normalize your totals. Okay, so how can you display the population density for each ward? Just the way we displayed the population totals. Okay, so that's my homework for you. Okay, in case you have any queries, you can obviously drop me a mail, or drop me a message, WhatsApp me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rohit, for your amazing presentation and engaging way of teaching. Super impressed. So I would welcome participants to ask any questions or share any comments or feedback. Anything that you may have learned or not learned or still have a doubt about. Yes, Swaroop.
Hello, sir. Thanks for sharing your valuable information. It's quite a very informative class for me. I often use QGIS, but not much more. I'm quite familiar with ArcGIS. Today's class is very informative for me. I have a question. When I complete a map in QGIS, is there any way to share online if I generate a link and share with my client, my friend to see the data? Is there any option?
Okay, thanks, Swaroop, for the question. So there is an option. Is my screen still sharing?
No, sir.
In any case, There is a plugin in QGIS. I'll just quickly reshare my screen. So it's called Q3 GIS, I believe. Sorry. Yeah. So Q3. Oh yeah, QGIS to 3JS. Okay, there is also a plugin called QGIS to Web. Both these you can check out online. They've got their own. You can just check out the homepage as to how you can use these. So this will help you to create a web-based map. Okay. What I can do is I can maybe just copy paste this in the chat so that you can check it out later. So yeah, you can use these to share your map. I had shown a small in one of the slides. I had shown you an image of the capital cities. So Google Maps is a very easy interface that you can use to quickly create such maps and share. So that's one easy way to do it. In case you don't want too much to do with GIS, then that's the easier way.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
We have another hand raise from who had raised a hand? I guess. Any more questions, please? You can even type in. Mr. Shmita.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, sir. My question is that when we click on edit button and we edit some kind of add some features or edit some features or maybe process like geoprocessing tools we use. So we edit the attribute tables. So when we click the save button, does this affect the original data, or what can we do to save it as another data so that it doesn't affect the original data?
Okay, that's a very good question. Okay, so you're absolutely right. It affects, I mean, the answer to your question is yes, it affects the original data. So always remember, if you've got some data with a lot of difficulty and you want to retain it, okay, then it's a better idea to export that data, export a copy of that data. Remember how I exported from one projection into another projection? You follow the same way. You export the data in the folder that you want to work in, and then you start working on that data. Okay. Another thing, you mentioned geoprocessing. So when you're using any of these geoprocessing tools, it does not actually edit your original shapefile on which the geoprocessing tools are working. Only when you're using the editor, the toggle editing button on your selected shapefile, only then that selected shapefile is being edited. Okay, and it's going to undergo change. Now remember, there is no undo for that also. Okay, so even if you say that, okay, I won't save this project, I'll just close this project and I'll get the same shapefile that I had originally, that's not going to happen. It's going to change the shapefile. Okay, so be careful when you're doing that. So it's always a good practice that you create a copy of your original data and do your edits on your copy. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
More questions, please. So we'll be having a good homework from Rohit sir today. Rohit, you can just WhatsApp me that much message so I can put it in the assignments for everyone.
Okay, sure.
Maybe you can quiz them to know how much they've understood. No problem. So if they have some more questions, probably they can write to us in the feedback form that we'll be collecting.
Okay.
No problem.
So any questions related to the homework? Maybe we can start from there. I have given some cues already in my presentation, and in the demo, I have already given you cues as to how you can do this. So I think it's pretty straightforward. This might be a little tricky. So, but again, I also have this README file which gives you the steps that you need to take. Okay. And where you can find and how you can add things, all of that has been added. Quiz. Okay. So maybe you guys can tell me, can you export a map as a JPEG and still locate the map? Does anyone know? If I have a JPEG map, say I'm exporting this map that I created as a JPEG image. Can I load the map in QGIS? Do you think it will get located correctly?
I think, sir, no, because of JPEG.
Wait. Don't give the reason. Swaroop, you have experience with ArcGIS. So let someone else answer. You're absolutely right, but let someone else answer why. Okay. Swaroop is right. It won't get located accurately. Okay. It won't fall in the right location. But I want to know why. Can someone else answer? Yeah, Shushmita, I think you've raised your hand.
So maybe because when we export it to a JPEG image, it has lost its geographic information related to that. So it cannot be imported as a located.
Okay, absolutely right. So my follow-up question is to someone else, then what format should I save it in? Which is that raster format which is going to retain the geographic information?
GeoTIFF.
Sorry?
TIFF format.
You're partly correct. Anyone else? Sorry, I'm just being a little strict on this answer. Anyone else? Okay, so the TIFF format is pretty complex, okay? But only a GeoTIFF format image is going to retain your geographic information. Again, it's not going to have a different extension, so it's still going to be called .tif, but it's not strictly speaking a TIFF image. It's a GeoTIFF format. that will retain your geographic information. Okay. All right.
Oh, sir, why do you call it GOT?
Sorry.
File format .t. When we call it GOT, when it capture .prj file format.
So it won't have a separate .prj file. It gets stored in that TIFF file only. So, oh, I don't have an example of that in your folder, I think. No, sorry. Maybe. So PRJ file is created only for a shapefile actually.
So, sir, I have a question. If I have a map, like image that stored in a .TIFF format, how could I understand is information .prj information stored or not?
How can you check? Is it that's your question?
Yes, yes, sir.
But the easiest way is just to drag and drop it. Wherever you're in QGIS, you can just drag and drop it. Okay. So there are also programs that say, I think in the properties, it should show up. Okay. In the properties, the file properties, it will show up. Let's quickly show you. So for example, I hope my screen is visible. Okay. So I have this elevation data. Okay. I can just drag and drop it here. And as you can see, this is landed in the right location. So which means my location data is there along with the file. I think if you go to the properties, you might see this location data. It's not there. Yes, not. But the easiest way is to just drop it in QGIS and you'll get it. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
More questions?
Sorry.
So have you all understood everything about QGIS, and can we give you some mega projects to do that, like a challenge beyond the homework? So Rohit, what's the advantage of other paid software like ArcGIS over QGIS?
Oh, okay. So I think one thing is stability. Say when you are investing in a software like ArcGIS, you are actually paying them to make the software as stable as possible. So the current version of ArcGIS that you'll be using will be the most stable one. In case of QGIS, what happens is based on your computer configuration, you might have certain problems in running certain algorithms. Okay, and that you'll realize that the good part about QGIS is that you can use multiple versions of QGIS. So right now I have say about 3 or 4 versions of QGIS installed, because I know that, okay, I'm going to get certain error here, then I can always switch back to another version and I can, use that. But yeah, that sometimes can be an issue where certain programs might crash, like during today's demo also QGIS just crashed. So that can happen sometimes, but it's very rare, and it's when you're indulging in very heavy program work.
So if we are doing some crowdsourced projects, for example, if we are doing like crowdsource mapping of a town, or when we're doing mapping during a disaster,
So how useful can QGIS be in that case?
I think the most important factor is that, say you have multiple people working. Yeah, that is an advantage. You have multiple people working across the globe, can collaborate, and can share different formats with each other. And they don't need to be, be having proprietary software like ArcGIS. They don't need to have that. In fact, now there are plugins which allow you to completely, say, transform or completely convert ArcGIS formats into QGIS formats along with the styling and everything. That software is currently, the plugin is currently paid, and once they reach their goal, they have a certain goal in mind that, okay, once we reach this much goal, we are going to open it out for the community. So that's how the open source community works. They will keep it paid until the point that their efforts are getting some thing in return, and then they'll make it open for the community. So yeah, so that is
when
one
we
advantage.
say,
with
when
QGIS.
we talk about the open data, I mean, considering that, let's say I'm completely naive about it, and if we have to explain it to stakeholders, and if their question is that, okay, you'll be collecting the data about my town, where does this data get stored? What is the server, and who owns that data end of the day, and who has the rights to this data? So what do we explain them like?
Okay, so when you talk about open source data or open GIS, there are multiple levels to it. So for example, there is QGIS server. So they have their own servers where you can upload that data. Okay, and you can host your data somewhere else and then use it in QGIS. All of that is possible. So it's really up to you and up to what your client wants. If the client doesn't want the data to be outside, you don't need to host it on a public server. You can host it in a private server and still make, say, the end product available to the public with limited features or with full features, whatever you want. Right? So that again becomes a part of, say, web mapping and WebGIS as to what features you want to incorporate. But you can still use open source software to actually, get the same end result.
Thanks, Rohit. So if our students need to learn this more, maybe you can recommend us some reading materials later, so I can include it in the learning as well.
Yeah, sure. I think I have provided few links already in my presentation, so you can definitely check those out.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much, Rohit. We would come to an end of this presentation. And once again, I thank you very much for being a part of this course and being so generous with your sharing of your learning and your experiences with us. I hope everyone in this course is going to benefit a lot from what you have shared, not just now while they're watching the live, but even later when they watch the recording. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.